Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And today, we are starting off in the Avdiivka pocket. Now, I've started the map from a view that existed about a week ago. And I wanted to show you, the viewer, the rapid collapse, or the rapid ongoing collapse of the Avdiivka pocket. Now, we're going to fast forward it back from the 29th of January. Pay close attention to the northern quadrant, the northeastern quadrant of the battlefield, as you start to see the Ukrainian fortified defensive positions wane and then crumble as Russian forces move forward. So here we go forward. Initial breakthrough, secondary breakthroughs, and then special operation forces in the city itself of Avdiivka. Now, we are seeing also new weapon systems that are being used by the Russians. And I wouldn't call them new weapon systems. These were weapon systems that existed, albeit in very small numbers, prior to around 2015. These new weapons, which are being used by the Russian low observable stealth aircraft, the Su-57, these missiles are very fast. They travel in excess of Mach 2. They have a range of up to 120 to 150 kilometers. So what's making it very difficult for the NATO alliance, the United States, to track these missiles that have been launched is namely because they're being launched from these stealth systems. So these Russian Su-57s, as you see here on the screen, approach the front lines, or in many cases are many, many miles back from the front lines, and then they fire the Grom air-to-surface weapon system. This is a weapon now that is now being mass-produced. It existed way back in 2015, but because of the conflict, because of the war, the Russians have amped up production of these systems, and we're seeing a lot more of them now being used on the battlefield. And these are used to strike rear area targets 100, 120 kilometers behind the line of contact, but they're also used to strike Ukrainian forces along the front lines. And again, as these Su-57s approach the theater of operations, it is much more difficult for the NATO alliance using their long-range AWACS, long-range early warning radars, to pick these up and identify them. And then once these Su-57s get within launch range, they fire these Grom missiles, or these KH-36, 38 missiles. Again, not a new system. These systems date back to really the KH-25, I believe it was, that the Russians had used during the Cold War. So what they do is they take an existing system, they modify it, it shoots faster, longer, with more precision. And that is the current system. The Russians call them the Groms. I think the NATO designation is the KH-36, 38. And that's what you're seeing here on the screen. But those systems are being used en masse now. Again, being mass-produced by the Russians. At the start of the war, the Russians used them, but in very, very small numbers. They are now being produced in mass and being used in mass by a range of Russian aircraft, including Su-30s, Su-34s, and then the low observable Su-57 as well. And that makes it even more difficult because, again, whereas the NATO alliance, using its long-range radars, can detect the Su-34 fullback, it has difficulty in picking up the Su-57. And then the Su-57 launches that missile, again, which travels very fast, Mach 2, and within just a few minutes, it impacts its target. And it's a 1,000-pound plus missile carrying a 500-pound warhead, traveling at Mach 2. A devastating instrument of war. But again, the collapse of the Avdiivka pocket, the Grom missile, is just one factor in a wide range of Russian weapon systems that are being used against the Ukrainians in and around this pocket. So the question is how long will the Avdiivka pocket last? And is the fate of General Zaluzhny tied to the defense of the Avdiivka pocket? Does Volodymyr Zelensky have the political power to sack General Zaluzhny? We would say no, he does not. However, there are other factors assisting Volodymyr Zelensky. And you know who that is? Hollywood. Sean Penn. A host of Hollywood A-listers are friends with and support Zelensky. So even if it is an unwise decision to sack Zaluzhny, those Hollywood A-listers who support Zelensky, who believes he needs to sack Zaluzhny, they are going to do so. Not because it's the prudent or correct decision to make. It's the emotional decision-making process of neoliberalism. The support of these Hollywood A-listers supporting Zelensky, making movies, making documentaries about Zelensky and the Ukrainian plight is more important than the decision-making processes of war. It's a fact. It's what's happening. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. So at the end of the day, it is more likely that with the support of Hollywood, and thereby the support of the Joseph Biden regime in Washington, and the unelected officials within the EU, the European Union, that enough pressure will be placed upon the Ukrainian power brokers that ultimately Zaluzhny is sacked. Then what happens? Does Zaluzhny proceed to a political career in Ukraine? Or is Zaluzhny given a retirement? Now, what does that look like? What does retirement look like? I'm going to let you be the judge of that. Is it a kinetic retirement? Or is it a retirement in prison? Or is it a retirement in South Beach, Miami? Difficult to say. But that is where things are progressing. The collapse of Avdiivka And not just Avdiivka, there are several pressure points along the entire conflict, along the entire line of contact, that the Russians are pressuring. Avdiivka could act as a domino effect. And especially if we see the sacking of Zaluzhny, what happens to the morale of the Ukrainian military? Do you remember what happened in Afghanistan? Do you remember what happened in Afghanistan? The Afghan army crumbled within days. Within days. Now look, the Ukrainians aren't fighting the Taliban. They're still humans. But they are fighting the Russian military. It's highly probable that Avdiivka, Zaluzhny, and other issues could have this cascading effect in which we could see the rapid collapse of the Ukrainian military. Watch this very closely. It's very important, and we could be entering a part of the conflict where there is opportunity for Russia to strike in game. Now, will it do so? Does it have the capability? Does it have the wherewithal? What are its plans? The Russian military. Does the Russian leadership within the military have the audacity to launch a robust operation, a coup de grace, against the Ukrainian military? We'll find out. Thank you for joining us today. More to come as always. Have a good day.